Hello. Hi, Jennifer. This is Jennifer
Hi.
Hecht, Jennifer Michael Hecht. She is a theologian, no, not a philosopher, a historian, a poet, a person, and her work has really touched me over the years in terms of my own struggle with suicidal ideations. And I think for me personally, when Stay came out, it provided a framework for me to understand why it was important to keep living without sort of a more formal spiritual sort of framework, if that makes sense. So can you talk, Jennifer, a little bit about kind of the books? So you've written 2 books and kind of how you found interest. The first book was Doubt. Was it published in 2004?
The paperback came out 2004. Yeah, and then I actually have 7 books out. 4 are nonfiction and 3 are poetry. But definitely I'm best known for Doubt and Stay. And with Doubt, Doubt grew out of my PhD in history. I had written a history of atheism and the rise of modern science, mostly in Europe. But when I was doing it, I couldn't find any good histories of atheism because they were all so polemic. You know, either you argued that all smart people ever have been, or you argue no one ever has, depending on your side. And so I really just wanted to write that straight story that I knew was there, that some people have been atheists. Who have they been? And it ended up being a big fat book, because when you're arguing that something exists and you find tons of evidence, you know, but it's full of stories, full of women and people who you wouldn't normally imagine having power and the ability to philosophize, but they find ways. You know, even the heretics trials in the Inquisition, some of the people were not the wrong religion. They were saying there's no God and saying how they live. So the book about the history of atheism was really a history of religious and other kind of doubt. And then after that, to my surprise, I became a sort of a priest of atheism, because when I would give my talks, which started out about history, people would ask personal questions. I think because my stories are always personal. I don't tell a history story unless I feel like, oh, you need to know this kind of to be a full person and get the whole story. You want to know this. And so Doubt is full of stories of people struggling. And I would tell these stories, and even if they were famous, you know, if it was Socrates, if he's having a problem and the audience hears that talking about those feelings, what gets displaced when you don't have religion, whether or not you still have God, what gets displaced? We're always so worried. Our back is up against the religious people saying we don't need that. Well, there's an aspect of human interaction that has been often classed in terms of religion. And if we just turn our back on all of that, we miss community. We miss too much of the good poetry.
I also think for me, growing up Unitarian and for all intents and terms agnostic or atheist, depending on how you personally defined it, people always assumed that I believed in nothing, that there was just nothing. And I think that a history or a written sort of, there's a legitimization.
Yeah, no, it legitimizes the experience. That's exactly right. And that's what I get. I still get, at first I got tons of mail from people who were hiding a lot of who they were, because they thought that they didn't know that they had friends in history and around them. And the book really served in that way. But yeah, once you become a sort of priest of doubt and people are asking you deep questions, yeah, that made it so that when these suicides happened in my world, I saw other people giving each other comfort in terms of God and religion. I saw most people not having any comfort at all. And I thought, what do I have really? And I knew, as I thought about it and worked on it, it took years before I even had a theory really, because I guess, this is the secret of everything. It's in poetry that I figure stuff out. I take crazy risks. I write what I feel, and then I wrote this poem called "The No Hemlock Rock." Don't kill yourself, and it just caught on. People, it spread. It before even viralness was happening, and that told me that it was safe to talk about. I wouldn't have dared look up and say, "Hey, everybody, you're not allowed to kill yourself," because I got reasons. Like, it's a crazy gesture, but it came up with these slow, me saying little things and hearing back a good roar of need.
Yeah,
And
I
so
needed to
they
hear
were
those things.
very,
I think that, I think you talk a bit about, I think there's a lot of, I think a lot of programs or recovery programs rely on the existence of a greater power or something above yourself, which I'm not saying denying or saying, but that wasn't something that worked for me because it wasn't something I held. And you talk a little bit about
right,
our debt to
right.
society as a form of faith in stay. And I was wondering if you could unpack that a little bit. Did I lose you for a minute?
Yeah, that's a really important question because AA is still uh, one of the sort of top models for us. I mean, it helps people, right? A lot of people drop out, but it helps a lot of people. And and the crazy thing is the rules of it, all those 12 steps were written so long ago. They don't fit in with modern psychology to talk about people's defects, or, that you'd need God to help you with every single one of those steps.
Oh no.
What was the thing you wanted me to start with?
The debt as a form of faith,
Um,
like the
debt.
debt we feel to society, that we feel.
Oh, yeah, that idea. Yeah, that uh I really like to concentrate on what we get from the debt, right? So, yes, the philosophers have said that we owe our community to try to stay. And that's a really healthy and good idea if it works for you. But for a lot of people, you know, we we expected a lot more in some ways, and we're disappointed, and we have a right to be. Every human being does if they want, and it's very hard to just say, oh, I'm going to do something for them. They didn't really do what I needed. So it's not, the angle I come at it from is the way that I feel uh, uh, the support of other people when I realize that I'm in a enmeshed situation and they would be harmed if I left. It's just, it's hard when we think of our contribution as only that, but it never really is. Those of us who experience a lot of pain, um, childhood trauma just from neglect is like, so rampant because the adults have to work a lot of the time, even with good parents. I mean, it's a lot of pain, and and it feels uh terrible, but it makes us good helpers. It makes us such good helpers, and we feel okay when we're helping. That's the real secret of AA, not the higher power that you need. Even Bill W said, I need an alcoholic. I need somebody to cure, because he was feeling bad. Um, that's what we do. What we're doing right now is healing to you and to me. We're helping other people. Somebody's looking at us and saying, oh, this is hard. Okay, if the commercial says it's supposed to be easy, if I drink a Pepsi, that's not going to do the trick. This to really understand how much other people are struggling, even though we're all trying to put on the best possible impression of a healthy person. I don't know why we try so hard, I guess that is my secret. I try to tell my secrets. I think it's a very moral thing to do in this day and age.
Oh, why is that?
The pain.
Why is that? Or why is, let me rephrase it as a sentence. So you try to tell your secret as a sort of moral obligation in this day and age. Can you sort of unpack why or what telling your secret, the
Well, for
function
one
of that is?
secret, keep me feeling like things are okay, because I can't manage life in the total way that you're supposed to have everything done. And so only when I hear that other people are dropping things by accident can I feel like, all right, I guess I'm doing okay. Um, so I feel like I have that to offer other people. I have my failings, if nothing else, to offer other people, right? And it matters. But the bigger part of it, I suppose, is the poetry part, that I started out as a poet, and that nobody knows how to write a poem ever, no matter how many you've written. You face that blank page and you want to say something that actually matters. It's not that you're being confessional just because you need material. It's that you dig until you feel the nerve, and then you have something worth saying and trying to sort out. So I have told so many of my secrets in my poetry, and the comedy is no one reads poetry, so they're still secrets.
That is comedic. However, after interviewing you, I'm gonna have to get my hands on your poetry for multiple reasons now. But I think like for me, there's sort of like a real connective power in shared vulnerability. And growing up in my family culture, it was that way. And then now as an adult, there's like a very specific feeling that I get from this sort of
Yeah.
shared feeling safe and secure, and that I think is priceless.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's the only thing that stands up to depression. Even in my saddest times, I can never dismiss the letters I got from people who say that they're still here because they read the book or listened to one of my podcasts or something, and they say, took me a while to really get it, but my kids, you know, uh, they those are incredible letters to get. And and when you feel terrible from depression or whatever, just a bad day, your successes don't make you feel much better. But those letters,
They
they
help.
never lose power. That to make me feel okay, all this work, all this trying is worth it, is beautiful, is strong. All those things come from that helping thing. And I sure didn't go into it for that, but having found it, it's so good. It's so good and so healing.
Can we rest really quickly? That sounds like an oxymoronic. I think that's the right term. Um, on what you're working on now and what fascinates you at the moment.
Yeah. I do want to say also about that secret thing that I'm just from a slightly older generation than the world that is making things right now. And many more things were secret. Um, Many more things were secret. So I had, I'm still sort of a gender interesting person, but I was very distressed over gender confusion as a teenager. And that was just, there was not one way to speak about that unless you went I went to St. Vincent's where they had meetings there wasn't the word trans yet. I couldn't even work it out. So that stuff's in my poetry, but you wouldn't always know it unless you had the key to unlock some of it, because it was so scary at the time. And so yeah, my secrets are all. I even have one poem that's called "Please Use This Against Me." And I say, if I ever want to become a Republican or anything, I'll let you know right now that and I just sort of confess, fooling around with girls, fooling around with drugs, whatever, just all in poetic secret form, but enough to not make me really electable. And so my self me from going to conservative because I've already told my
So
but yeah, so that but you asked a question I really want to answer, which is that the new book, which I'm finishing, is about almost a guidebook with different headings of things that religion helps people with. And if you don't have religion, here's a way that poetry and some of the old techniques of religion, let's excavate some of the behaviors, like gathering together, like getting in the river, Hinduism is all about the gun. I mean, you go and you do these experiences in religion. As a Catholic person, that touch of the holy water, all of that stuff, sensual. It's how you reach the deeper part of us, and it's ours as much as religions. It existed before religion, and like the word sacred, I wouldn't have used it if it was just a religious word, but it's not. It comes from before.
how do you
Religions.
will you define sacred really fast? Sorry, there are so many more questions. I have everything you say leads to another question, but will you define really briefly what you mean when you use sacred? Because I think the joining of poetry and sacred to me is really impactful.
That's right. And I call it the Poetic Sacred to make sure that people know what I'm talking about. I don't call myself an atheist anymore. I call myself a poetic realist, because there's so many more things than God that I don't believe in, and I want to include those. And atheism is so limited. But boy, could you remind me of what you just asked me?
Oh, if you could define sacred.
Oh yeah. Sacred comes from to sanctify. It was first from the word treaty. It's ancient, pre-Greek. The word treaty is where we started from. Imagine what it takes to make a treaty with someone who killed some of the people on your side, and you killed some of the people on their side, and your brother's dead because of this fight. How do you forgive and move on? You must have some notion of one treaty at some point that worked. Let's invoke that treaty. Remember the treaty of whatever, where we did stop killing each other and forgave each other the deaths of our loved ones. You invoke the one that worked. You invoke the time it worked to have peace. And that's the beginning of the word sacred, the treaty between people.
Oh, that's beautiful. And using poetry as a tool to access that.
Yeah.
Is that kind of
Well, we already do that with weddings and funerals, where if whether or not you're in religion, but especially if you don't have religion, to help create a moment. If you have to go up there and say something at a funeral and you don't want to say a prayer, you say a poem. That's already established, and weddings have poetry. And it began to occur to me that people who read a great deal of poetry have something really great, which is when you need it, sometimes these poems come to mind. And most of us don't have too many that do that trick. But I just thought I could help people if I could tell them, just pick any poem that has to do with, say, romantic love. Pick one that has to do with grief and keep it. And that you read that poem again when you need that, because that will get deep. We teach people poetry like a fire hose these days. That's not how you did in religion. There was one prayer for this and one prayer for going to sleep and one prayer for eating, and they get into you, and you get to have these moments of peace and connection with everything that's so wonderful in life, which is all here, and none of it's there if you die. You don't get to peek through some screen. Everything's here, and it's really amazing when we're in enough of a mood to take it. I mean, all of it, dogs and rainbows and just the fucking fact of colors. Ooh, I curse, but just everything. It's so extraordinarily unusual. And giraffes. Who
Yeah.
thought of a giraffe? Ostriches. It's I know. And it really, when you can be here for it, it's pretty amazing. And poetry helps you be here for it.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer, for all of your work. And thank you personally for the impact you've had on really developing a language and a rationale to stay here on this planet and enjoy
Thank you so
the
much.
existence of giraffes.
Let's please stay in touch. I really love talking to you.
You too. Take care.
Bye.